My family sent me a fruit box for Christmas and a bill for their ski vacation, which they paid using my card. My name is Lorraine Wexler. I'm 72. I live alone in Bridger Creek, where winters stay longer than I remember, and the post office still recognizes every name on the envelopes. I used to be an accountant. These days, I mostly prepare tea-count snowflakes and try not to make the place too quiet. I am not telling this tale to complain. I'm telling you this because someone else may have received a Christmas gift basket from their own children, along with a bill they were never questioned about. Some heartaches do not make a sound. Some betrayals might not require shouting. They appear on a bank statement or in a 3-word greeting card. In that moment, you realize that the world you believed was your family's has long since gone on. If you've ever felt like a burden, like too much, like a problem to be solved just because you loved too much, this may be your tale as well. It is 9 a.m. on Christmas morning. On the snow-covered porch, I picked up a crumpled fruit bouquet and a note that had only 3 words, tranquil. The kids, no Merry Christmas, no Mom. There is no name except then the fading corporate print in the lower corner, Shady Mountain Fruit Baskets Company, a service for delivering gifts in bulk. Always Run offers last-minute savings. I hoisted the basket. The apples were already shriveling and seemed heavier, as if they had something older inside. I put it down on the kitchen table. The melting snow created a damp ring on the wooden surface. The plastic wrap had a slight chemical fragrance that mixed with the frigid air, making me cringe. The coffee pot on the counter was still buzzing. I'd left it on since early morning, not for anyone, but out of habit. Most years, I'd make cinnamon waffles, turn on classical music, sit by the window, and wait for someone to call. However, this year, there were no waffles. There are no lights, no hope. The aroma of cinnamon remained slightly in the kitchen, as if the home itself was unable to let go of the memories. Rachel once advised me, "You should put out some Christmas decorations, make it seem celebratory." But she never arrived home, instead sending pleasantries on the group chat. They all did Rachel, Ev, and Lily. Their words were usually concise and conclusive. There are no questions. As if I were only a shipping address. There is no need to reply. I poured myself some coffee and set the mug near the window. The snow had accumulated in the backyard, burying the old path that ran through the pine trees. Bridger Creek was quiet this morning. On the radio, a local broadcaster mentioned holiday reunions where people from all generations get together. I smirked. Gathers together. I don't recall the last time I heard someone walk through this door. A FedEx vehicle stopped outside the gate. I pulled up my phone with the intention of checking the weather, but my thumb slid habitually onto a social networking app. Rachel, Lily, and Evan stand by a big Christmas tree at Aspen Lodge in Colorado. Golden lights, a wine buffet, and a blazing fireplace. Each carried a bottle of champagne, wore hand-knit sweaters, and smiled with a delight that left no place for me. I scrolled to the caption. Rachel had penned, "Those who matter most." I read them slowly. Then those who are most important. I did not weep. I suddenly observed that the coffee had become cold sooner than normal. I placed down the phone and sat still for a long time. My thoughts wandered to the day I brought them all to Disneyland when Lily turned 10. I paid installments for 8 months to fund the vacation. Back then, I had no idea I was investing in being forgotten. A mild buzz. I received an SMS notice. Chase notifications. You have just made a purchase. 17560th. Aspen Lodge Resort. Deck 2327. The card ends with 1470. I gazed at the number. My heart slowed. 1470 is my card. This is the one I use for groceries. I recalled precisely where I had left it in the small drawer beneath my budgeting notebook. And I remembered vividly the last time Evan had asked Mom, "Do you still remember your PIN, just in case?" I put down my coffee cup. There's no shaking. Don't panic. Just a subtle cold that sunk further into my hands. The kitchen felt unnaturally spacious, as if the quietness was not only filling the area, but also resting peacefully over me. I moved to the drawer. I opened it. The card was still there, nestled along the notebook's edge, close to a stub of pencil that I'd retained for no apparent reason. I picked it up. I flipped it over. The magnetic strip had worn out from years of gas station swipes. I did not remember ever granting anyone permission to use it. But then again, wasn't it permission? When Evan begged for help paying for something quickly, there was no turning him down. It was giving Rachel the PIN since she had forgotten her wallet. Lily texted me a snapshot of a receipt for using your card. I will pay you back. Nobody ever did. I never asked. I sat back down in the wooden kitchen chair, card in hand. The antique clock on the wall chimed slowly, its second hand aging alongside the house. Light streamed through the window, leaving a broad line on the floor where Lily used to wheel her toy car over the holidays. We used to create gingerbread homes together. I'd arrange the candies just so. Rachel always used too much powdered sugar. Evan would play vintage jazz recordings. And my husband Walter would sit nearby, pretending to read, while smiling any time he looked up. I used to believe that such times would stay. I turned back on the radio. I'll be home for Christmas and have already started playing. But this time, if just in my dreams, the words felt penned specifically for me. I didn't need someone to come home. I only needed to be remembered. However, their images and receipts plainly show that I was not present. Lorraine Wexler was the only authorized cardholder. I slid the card into my coat pocket and turned to see the fruit basket still sitting there, a bizarre little testimony to my life. Enough to acknowledge, but not enough to actually invite. No phone call, no permission request, no knock on the door. But they got my account information and utilized it as if it were theirs. I put on Walter's old sweater, the one he wore on our final Christmas together. It still had a slight scent of smoke and poor soap. I draped a gray shawl over my neck. Outside, the snow was still falling lightly, but steadily. I opened the door. The wind swept in as if it had been waiting all morning. FedEx footsteps remained fresh on the steps. I stepped out. The snow had reached my ankles and was extremely cold. But I did not stop. I didn't have someplace in particular to go. But I knew that if I stayed and continued to play the silent waiting mother, nothing would change. I needed to breathe fresh air, not the type that smelled of crushed apples, the sort in which you could hear the wind. I stepped off the porch. The wind screamed through the trees. There was an odd sound like somebody attempting to speak, but not being heard. I halted and gazed into the trees. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt like I'd finally stepped out. I used to feel that if I never asked for anything, my children would keep me in their hearts. However, the invoices continued to arrive for the last 2 years. One question was never asked. Mom, have you got enough? That question reverberated in my head all morning, like a faint murmur every time my hand went for my coffee cup and then released it. The rising steam clouded the air, blending with the pungent aroma of melting snow outside the porch. I sat on the wooden chair, my back aching from the night before after spending too much time organizing the old file bin. My spouse used to call it the evidence suitcase. He never liked how many papers I saved, but knowing everything was easily accessible made me feel secure. Bill's assertions, AILth insurance documents, and an unused airline ticket to Kansas, dated 1994. I opened a file folder and went through receipts, Lily's outstanding tuition, amount Rachel's health insurance summary, and even Evan's endocrinology prescription, all of which had my name recorded as the payment. Over the previous 2 years, I've spent $73.40. Not every fee was large. Most cost a few $100s. But the way they stacked up, like unending silent demands, left me feeling colder than the wind outside. I took out another piece of paper, a half-written letter with unsteady handwriting from a late night I can't recall. The first line read, I think I'll be fine. if I simply keep the peace and do not annoy anyone. I intended to email it to Walter, merely to feel like I was still communicating with him, but I never did seal the envelope. It remained buried in the archives like a dimming part of me that could not find rest. Around midday, I put on my heavy coat and shoes and headed to Tilly's, the only cafe open on holidays. The roads were slick, but my ancient tires could take it. Moon River sounded quietly over the radio. Outside, everything was covered with white. A pine tree hung over someone's porch, its star slanted to one side. Tilly's was quiet. Bob sat at his normal back table, wearing his cowboy hat as usually. Doris waved as I stepped in. "Has anyone stopped by?" she inquired, putting more sugar into her peppermint tea. "No," I said. "They're busy, living." We both grinned. That modest smile you can only share with someone who understands the pain of being left out. Doris is 84. Sharp intellect, weak knees. I still assist her with filling out benefits applications and correcting problems in her pension paperwork. She believes it's very remarkable that people our age can even log on to government websites. I ordered pancakes and black coffee and sat near the window. The snow fell gently, like ash. Bob narrated the narrative of the winter. The highway froze, and for 3 days, the community ate only potatoes. I listened halfway. My mind are still caught on the figure, 73,000. After eating, I drove home. The wind picked up. The sun was out, but it provided little warmth. I entered, hung up my coat, took off my shoes, and proceeded to the desk near the window. My ancient laptop takes 2 tries to boot up. I launched the browser and logged into the bank. They were still using the same UI. I knew every tab and every click. 3 names flashed on the screen. Evan Wexler, I am an authorized user. Rachel Pierce, I am an authorized user. Lily Wexler, I am an authorized user. I gazed at those words with neither wrath nor grief, just a hollow familiarity. Imagine opening an old room and discovering that someone else has emptied away your possessions long ago. I gently moved the pointer from one name to the next. Evan, Rachel, Lily. Each one reminded me of a moment when I assured myself they are just borrowing. Evan lost his job after his business failed, so I offered him my card to help him save face in front of his family. When Rachel got divorced, I paid for her insurance so she could focus on her mental health. When Lily dropped out of school, I paid for yoga courses and a short-term apartment to give her room to find herself. None of them paid me back, and none of them ever inquired whether I had enough. I unlocked the drawer and took out an old tin box where I stored things no one else required. But I have statements, letters, and receipts. Inside was a notepad with a list of every cost I'd ever spent for my children. The final page displayed the total $73.40. I didn't save it to carry a grudge. I kept it as a reminder of how many times I had placed others ahead of myself. I put my hand on the mouse. A little box appeared beside Evan's name. Remove the authorized user. The pointer lingered. My hands did not quiver, just felt heavy. My gaze fixed on the term authorized. Permission was given. And who provided the permission? I did. So if things had gotten far beyond what I had planned, it was up to me to reclaim control. I clicked. A confirmation appeared. Are you certain you want to delete this family member's access? I read the word slowly, as if it were a farewell you had written but never sent. I clicked. Yes, Evan's name disappeared, then Rachel's, then Lily's. Each click seemed little, yet it left a big void within me. Not because I regretted it, but because I never imagined I would do it. I never imagined severing any ties with my children. But when faith becomes a burden, letting go does not imply giving up. It's a means of returning to oneself. I shut the laptop. I poured myself a glass of water. No tea, no sugar. I needed something clear. There's no sweetness trying to be consolation. The fruit basket from Christmas was still sitting on the table. 2 apples had shriveled to their cores, with the cellophane flaking off at the corners. I picked it up, opened the trash can, and tossed it in. The first time I ever tossed away a present from my kids. Without any guilt. Outside, twilight had descended. The snow reflected a faint golden light from the neighbors' homes. Doris was probably watching an old black and white film. Bob could still be telling stories at Tilly's. I felt something lift off my chest, like a coating of ice eventually shattering. I rose up, reached for my coat, and opened the door. The chilly wind swept in, and this time, I didn't turn away. My tracks from that morning were still visible in the snow. I went onto the porch and did not look back. And for the first time in years, I persuaded myself I had the right to declare, "That's it." The bank made no inquiries as to why, but Toby, the young man behind the counter, stared at me as if I had recently lost someone. I arrived early before the frost had cleared off the windshield. The bank had recently opened. The artificial tree in the corner was still decorated with a few scattered silver ornaments. No one had taken it down, as if the town wasn't ready to leave the Christmas season. "Can I assist you with something?" Toby smiled softly and stretched across the desk to retrieve a pen. I took out my wallet and saw my ID, a printed statement, and a request to revoke access for 3 people, Evan Wexler, Rachel Pierce, and Lily Wexler. I arranged them gently on the glass counter. Toby scanned the documents. His eyes were not interested, but something in them had dulled, not with sympathy, but as if he was staring at someone who had just closed the door on a home they had lived in for a lifetime. He responded, "Let me verify these for you," typing softly. "I will need your signature next to each one." I signed. My fingers did not quiver, but my gaze lingered on each name as if perusing the fading pages of a long-kept ledger. Evan, the tiny guy. In 1992, I brought him to the old branch wearing a gray button-up and carrying his first savings book. Rachel, the headstrong girl who once wrote me a handwritten letter requesting tuition while I was resting in the hospital. Lily, born prematurely in August, whose small hand I held for 3 winters straight. When I finished signing, I slid the papers back. Toby nodded, stopped for a second, then said, "Do you want to take the Christmas tree? We are going to discard it, but it is still excellent." I grinned. "No, keep it as is." I drove directly from the bank to a little legal office near the town hall. Andrea, the lawyer with silver hair, greeted me as I entered a room packed with books and a beautiful electric fireplace. I didn't have to explain much. Andrea listened in the same manner that people do after hearing too many stories like mine. I made it obvious to her that I wanted to revise my will. No longer equitable division. There is actually no divide at all. I mentioned I wanted to put up a scholarship fund for single mothers over 50 who desire to return to school. Andrea nodded as she mentioned learning a trade. "A significant choice, Miss Wexler." I signed a couple further documents. I used a pen with the local hospital's emblem, which we used to give to patients while I worked in the billing department. The blue ink stretched over the paper like a line that I couldn't get back across. When I arrived home, I put my coat on the same old peg, set my wallet on the kitchen counter. The home remained silent, but it no longer seemed hollow. It seemed like the stage after the final curtain. Warm golden lighting velvet drapes and the lead actor steps gently off stage. I opened my wallet and took out an old business card. The paper had yellowed significantly, and the ink was smeared. Dr. Camille Rayner. I'd had the card for 8 years, never made a call. But this morning, when I withdrew it from the little pocket next to Walter's portrait, I realized it was time. The telephone rang 3 times, before anybody picked up. "Rayner Counseling," a calm voice stated. "This is Camille." I cleared my throat. "This is Lorraine Wexler. I've had your card for a long time." There was a pause. "Lorraine," she spoke quietly. "I remember. Are you okay?" I took a breath. "I believe I just severed relations with my children." Camille's voice lacked pity. "Just gifts. We can schedule a session." I nodded, but she could not see it. Yes, in the morning would be ideal. I hung up the phone, placed it on the counter, and opened the refrigerator. There wasn't much left, but a carton of eggs, almond milk, and half a cornbread loaf from the previous week. I wasn't hungry, but I did take a slice. I boiled water and prepared some peppermint tea. My hands went through the motions like I'd heard the music for years. There is no sheet music. There is no audience. I poured the tea into a porcelain cup featuring an hourglass on the side. Walter sent me a gift for my 50th birthday. I set it on a wooden tray and brought it into the living room, where a lamp's soft glow reflected off the window glass, forming pleasant shadows on the walls. Outside, the snow was still falling gently, not as thick as yesterday, but enough to smooth everything's edges. On the table was a printed statement from the previous day, with the total marked in red ink. I lighted a cinnamon candle from the drawer. The aroma drifted through the room like a memory, transporting me to a distant winter when Walter, the kids, and I gathered around the dinner table, hands together, praying before the meal. Take 5. Dave Brubeck began playing from an old CD I had in the drawer. The jazz sounds landed like slow footsteps in the snow, quiet but assured. I closed my eyes. Allow the song to wash through me as if the tune could understand what I couldn't express. I sat at the table and chopped the cornbread into little pieces while chewing gently. There was nothing unique about it, only a somewhat dry slice. Take a sip of unsweetened tea. Surprisingly, I did not feel depressed. I did not feel empty, only tranquil, like if I had just placed the first brick of a new type of home, unseen, yet real enough to protect my soul. My gaze shifted to the corner table where an old sketch lay folded. I opened it, wiped the dust away, and grinned. It was a sketch of a lakeside cabin that Walter and I had hoped to build once we retired. Wooden walls, a big porch, a fireplace, and windows overlooking the lake. I used to think of it as a failed dream, but something inside me murmured, "It's not too late. I still have strength. I still have hands. I still have freedom." The phone buzzed, breaking through the silence. I looked at the landline, which had 3 red blinking lights. Evan called. A minute later, Rachel, then Lily. Each name flashed up like a hand reaching out from the darkness. But I no longer felt compelled to take hold. I didn't respond. I did not play the messages. I didn't save the calls. I just closed my eyes. I leaned my head lightly on the back of the chair and muttered to no one but myself, "This is the first dinner I've had without feeling like I owed anybody anything." Those calls did not need a reply. 3 days later, Evan showed up. No knock. There's no warning. It was as if he had just awoken from a dream and I had long ago gone away. I did not close the door. "I've just closed my wallet." I spoke gently, hands clasped around my ginger. Tea eyes were riveted on Evan, standing in my living room like a spring storm out of season. The youngster, no, the 46-year-old man I used to hold in my arms, smashed his hand against the pinewood table hard enough to make the candle dish shake. His cheeks were flushed with fury. However, his eyes were filled with fear. He had never been rejected, at least not from me. Evan muttered with gritted teeth, "I can't believe you did this. My clinic payment was denied. I am getting my thyroid examined." Do you even get that I nodded slightly? I do. But the card now just has one name on it, mine, and I'm not letting anyone else use it. Evan sneered. "You think this is fair?" I did not respond. Instead, I went for another slice of dried ginger and placed it in my tea. The steam rose harsh but relaxing. The phone vibrated on the table. Rachel was calling on video this time. I didn't respond. I let Evan see her face on the television for himself. "Mom, what is going on?" Rachel questioned, her lips tense and her camera wobbling as if she were strolling along a restaurant corridor. Evan responds, "You cut all the cards and stopped the payments. Are you okay?" I remained steady. "I am doing extremely well. Thank you for inquiring." "Why are you doing this?" Rachel's voice swelled to a plea. "I know I've been stressed. The doctor advised me to lower my hypertension." "Do you think this helps?" Lily's voice cut in from behind Rachel. "Don't you see how the family is breaking apart?" When I looked at them, I knew that their fury was not the most agonizing thing. It was because they believed it made sense. I did not feel furious, just exhausted and hollow. I set down my tea. I reached for my extra phone. I dialed a number that I had stored for more than a decade, one I had never called before. 3 rings. Camille responded steadily and unhurriedly, just like before. "Hello, Lorraine, I just said no," I told her, to the 3 of them. No shouting. There were no tears, just saying no. "Good," she responded gently. "What are you seeing now?" I looked up. Evan was pacing the room as if he was looking for one more argument. Rachel was fading off the screen. Lily buried her head in her sister's shoulder. I pointed out that they had never asked me what I needed. Even when I say no, they believe I'm testing them. Camille inhaled slowly. "What were you most terrified of when saying no to your kids?" An ancient question. But this time I didn't look away. I used to be frightened of losing them. But I'm beginning to wonder whether the only thing keeping them together is money. In my solitude, I realized that what I'd lost hadn't been family for a long time. Camille said only one thing. "They cannot take away your breath." I nodded. "The call has ended." Evan came closer quietly for the first time. "We'll hold a family meeting, Saturday, 4 p.m., Rachel's apartment. You should come." I didn't inquire who came up with it. Nobody asked whether I wanted to. I walked him to the door without putting on his coat, not out of disobedience, but because I no longer felt the need to remain warm in an environment that had been much too chilly for too long. He did not glance back. The vehicle rumbled through the new snow tires and skidded once before vanishing around the bend bordered with pine trees. No goodbyes, no mom. Take care. Still, I stayed at the barrier for another minute, silently affirming that for the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking someone to bridge the gap. Back inside, I prepared another cup of ginger tea, which was the only thing I used to make when someone in the family was sick, concerned or disappointed, but still need consolation. I had brewed it on many lonely evenings, but tonight seemed different. I sat down at the table and opened my phone. A message from the Rachel family meeting, Saturday, 4 p.m. Rachel's. No invitation. There's no kindness. Just a command. I didn't answer immediately. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and opened the second drawer on the left, where I stored items that were not urgent but could not be discarded. A little ebony box etched with delicate characters remained in place. Walter and Lorraine, 1983. I opened it. Inside was a photograph of us at Flathead Lake. His arm wrapped around me, his hair blown wild by the wind, and I smiled lightly. His light gray vacation coat lay beneath it. I straightened out the creases and tried it on. It still fits. Still felt heated. I approached the mirror. My hair was now silver. There are no more gentle waves as previously. But there was something in me that I had never noticed before. Not defiance, but calmness. I sat at the vanity. A red notepad sat beside me where I had previously scribbled down cookie recipes, medical phone numbers, and Walter's meds. On the last page, I wrote a sentence for my 71st birthday. "If no one defends you, do not forsake yourself." I closed my eyes. Camille's voice rang faintly in my head. "Do you think that forgiving them will alter anything I used to think so? Now I don't. I am no longer hopeful that others will change. I live like this. I'm no longer breaking promises to myself." The phone vibrated again. "Rachel, I hope you arrive with an open heart." I read the message. No frown. No smile. I just removed it. No response. I'm no longer the mother who always showed up to preserve the peace at the dinner table. None of the 3 inquired whether I wanted to attend the meeting. They merely chose the moment. I decided where to go. As if I were a system error, something that should be handled immediately is not elegantly done and then ignored. I came on time. It's not early. It's not late. Rachel resided in a townhouse in one of the newer housing estates. Bright white aligned in exact rows, with each window identical. I double-checked the address 3 times to ensure its accuracy. The door opened. No greetings. No hugs. Rachel turned away abruptly and said, "Come in, we're waiting." I stepped inside. Even with my fur-lined shoes, the laminated flooring seemed frigid. A cheap candle on the table gave out a slight vanilla aroma. More smoke than scent. The living room resembled a magazine cover, white walls, beige sofa, a glass coffee table, but not a single family photo. There is no evidence that an elderly mother ever visited. The supper table was set, but nobody was eating, just a glass of water and an open notebook. The page is blank, as if this meeting were an official intervention. Rachel began, "Mom, I'm not saying anything to judge you. We're merely concerned about you." I nodded. "Worried about me?" "Yes. You turned off all financial access without informing anyone. Do you understand how this affected us?" Evan jumped in annoyance, raising his voice. "I only needed a little help. As always, what's wrong with relying on our mother Lily, sitting at the end of the table?" Spoke quietly. "We believe you could be going through something, a crisis. Maybe it's age-related." I glanced at all three of them. Their faces still had traits that I used to appreciate. Rachel has almond eyes. Evan has a high forehead. Lily's mouth trembled as she wept. However, I no longer regarded them as lost children in need of supervision. I reached inside my backpack, retrieved a stack of documents, and placed them on the table. Here are the receipts I preserved. Evan's tuition for the previous 2 years has been $24,000. Lily's insurance costs $11,300. Rachel, make efforts for your daughter, your startup. Your well-being to retreats costs $37,700. Nobody moved. I continued. That amounts to $73,000 in total. I do not want it back, but I also don't want to be treated like a limitless petrol pump. Rachel offered a dry laugh. You meticulously kept track of every dime. That is a bit much, Mom. I stared at her directly. I used to be the chief accountant. I never forget numbers. But I can't seem to recall the last time one of you embraced me just because I am your mother, not because I could pay for something. Despite the soothing buzzing of the electric fireplace in the corner, the air in the room thickened like moisture, waiting to freeze. Rachel slapped her fist into the table. You are turning yourself into a victim. Don't you see this? We're only trying to assist you. Get things under control. Manage things better. You should feel grateful. I did not respond. Instead, I cautiously delved into my coat pocket and took out a second piece of paper, nicely written and yellowed with age. My faith in my children is something I can no longer quantify in monetary terms. I placed the letter on the table next to the printed statements. Here's what I gave. No receipts, no interest, but now I think I should reserve a bit for myself. Evan leapt up from his chair. So do you believe we're simply freeloaders now? His voice broke, sounding something between shame and wrath. I remained calm. I spent money to raise 3 individuals. However, love is not a lifetime membership. Lily broke into tears. She cried real tears, as she did when she was put to the corner for stealing cookies as a youngster. But this time, her cries did not move me. Perhaps because I had finally realized that feeling is not proof of remorse. Sometimes it's merely a strategy for avoiding accountability. Evan clenched his fists and marched out the door. Without further word, the room became silent. Just my 2 girls and me. Rachel took up the page I had written carefully, folded it, and grinned. Thank you for the Christmas present, Mom. I didn't respond. I just stood and put on my coat. Before departing, I looked at both of them and said plainly, I do not require an apology. I'm just not willing to be the spot where blame is placed. No one responded. The chamber seemed colder than the snow outside. I went outside, hands deep in my coat pockets. The wind hit my cheek sharply, but also a reminder. I was still alive, truly lively, even after a discussion designed to break me. On my way home, I drove past a little bridge over a frozen brook. I looked at the motionless water trapped under the white crust. It appeared like something had been locked off for the winter, like how hearts may ice over after too many silent winters. I muttered to myself, not too loud. No, not bitterly, just a simple acknowledgement. Tomorrow I'll start sorting through some books. Perhaps it's time to locate a new home for myself. I did not clean them the next day, but a week later, I left. No notes, no messages, no explanations. I simply grabbed what was still mine and left. 3 months later, I was no longer the same person. What remained was only myself and a few seedling plants poking up through the frozen ground. Spring arrives slowly to this area of the earth. The snow hasn't melted completely, but the sun is no longer frigid. Light floods through the wooden window panes, exposing tiny dust particles suspended in the air. I sat on the porch steps, a cup of Earl Grey in hand, inhaling the aroma of tea and woodland breeze. The tiny cabin was around 2 hours from Bridger Creek. No clear phone signal, no bus route, just a rural path snaking through the pine woods. This location was formerly merely a folded drawing in my desk drawer. It had now become the calm beginning of a new existence, distinguished by tiny, steady, and personal things rather than huge gestures. I began growing lavender. The earth was still moist and chilly, but I was certain the roots would take hold. I read old novels. I continued where I had left off years ago. How to combine watercolors. How to shade the outline of a tree on wet paper. I poured tea, played jazz albums, and never awaited a knock on the door. Last week, I applied to teach a program called Life Accounting for Retirees in a little town library nearby. A clerk contacted me back, shocked to learn that I was 72 and still wanted to train. I just stated that I don't want to die with underutilized pieces of myself. No more explanation was required. This morning, while clipping weeds along the walkway, I saw a cloud of dust rising from the road. The automobile came to a stop. Evan went out, shirt-wrinkled, hands in pockets, his pace unsure like a youngster entering his first day of school. I wasn't startled and didn't rush. He looked around and then approached. "Mom." I nodded. He dug into his pocket and pulled out a check. $500. First repayment. I did not take it immediately away. I simply gazed at him. Evan's eyes looked strange. Not guilty, not quite remorse. Just silent. "I didn't think you'd want to see me again," he added quietly. I opened the door and gestured toward the inside. There was no sugar in the tea, but it is still hot. We sat opposite from one another on 2 little wooden chairs near the window. The delicate scent of Earl Grey permeated the room, blending with the breeze that swept through the trees outside. Neither of us spoke. We did not have to. Evan peered about the cabin, his gaze drawn to the bookshelves, the incomplete painting, and the pots of soil still waiting for actual sunshine. Then his attention shifted to the photo of his father on the table. The frame was antique with somewhat fogged glass that was still intact, still warm with Frank's gentle smile. "We're still talking about you," Evan murmured, his voice low and raspy. I didn't respond. That was not a sentence intended to be replied. He took a drink of tea and placed the cup down his hand, still firmly clasped in his lap. I recognized that stance, the pain of a man learning to support his own weight. "Can I come back?" he asked. I gazed outside the window. The light was piercing through the final covering of snow, spilling on the patch of land I had sown that morning. The light of early spring is dim, persistent, and unshakable, much like me today. "If you come back," I replied softly, "as a mature man, not expecting me to be your pocketbook, the door will remain open." He nodded. No one protested. No excuses. I just sat there like a youngster who had finally realized what it meant to be responsible. Evan stood as the sun began to slant toward the pine trees. "I will not annoy you." I escorted him to the door. No hugs, no guarantees. Just 2 people who stepped out of an unnamed loop and realized that not every pain requires an apology to begin healing. After his car had vanished beyond the woods, I returned to the table and opened my old brown notebook to the last page. I wrote, "I don't need them to make things right, because I have made myself whole." As I placed down the pen, a bird in the distance made a quiet, definite note that signaled the beginning of spring. I strolled out onto the porch, holding a lukewarm cup of tea. The air raised the hem of my old sweatshirt. Sunlight pierced the thin clouds, pouring through the remaining snow and settling on the patch of dirt just outside the front door where the first green shoots had begun to emerge. And I stood there silent and peaceful, like the last thread, delicately taken from an old skein of yarn, not frayed or broken, but just ended in its natural manner. Perhaps none of my 3 children understood. Their mother, who had formerly stretched every dime to care for them, had silently vanished that winter. What remained was a lady who had learned to break free from her quiet and reclaim her place in my life, which no longer seemed borrowed. I used to believe that sacrifice was love, but now I realize that if you don't know how to value yourself, even those to whom you have given everything will see you as a burden, like the old blanket that once kept the entire family warm through endless winters, only to be discarded when no one felt cold anymore. Forgotten, it had been relied on more times than they could count. If this tale strikes your heart, take a moment to remember the person who once prioritized you before themselves, and if there is still time, let them know they are not invisible.